Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Concrete Utopia, a Korean dramatic thriller from 2023 that stars Lee Byung-hun, Park Seo-joon, and Park Bo-young. Seoul is devastated overnight by a major earthquake. Everything is collapsed, and only one place remains intact: Imperial Palace Apartments. Residents begin to feel threatened as external survivors who have heard of this haven flock to the apartments. So they unite for survival, and with a new resident leader, Yeong-tak, played by Lee Byung-hun, they create new rules for residents and prevent entry to outsiders. And thanks to this, unlike the hellish world outside, the utopian apartments remain safe and peaceful. In an endless crisis for survival, however, an unexpected conflict begins among them. Now, overall, I'm not the biggest fan of disaster movies, or movies that takes place after a disaster. There are some good ones, but the premise kind of bores me on its surface. Almost never get excited for films like this. And then I saw that the runtime for this film was 2 hours and 10 minutes, and, you should know by now I'm a runtime snob, so I like my movies a little bit shorter by default. So I was not exactly enthusiastic about this one, but I like to keep up with modern Korean movies, so I gave it a shot. Now, the beginning of Concrete Utopia seems a little ridiculous. Like, they show a shot of a completely devastated city of Seoul, which was the consequence of this earthquake that was so strong, the crust of the earth shattered and created mountains within the city. Yet, one building was seemingly untouched and structurally stable somehow. But whatever, it's suspend disbelief, I guess. The other problem I kind of had early on was that the characters act only moderately inconvenienced by this cataclysmic event. Like, there's almost no panic at all. At least that's what I was seeing here. Like, you would think that people would be, freaking out more. Is this the end of the world? Can we even grow food anymore? Like, when you look out, there's, nothing left outside of this apartment. Is there fresh drinkable waterways somewhere? Where we can get some fresh water? These are questions that all come to mind. But these folks seem fine, just kind of hanging out in the apartment complex, rationing their prepackaged food, and living day to day. The mentality is very odd, what happens when you run out of the prepackaged? It's going to expire, guys. You should probably be thinking a little more forward thinking here. But I predicted this to be some kind of, black comedy early on, and there are a few scenes where I'm like, this movie's not going to take itself seriously, and it seems to be a black comedy in spots, or it has an undercurrent of it. In any case, you get Lee Byung-hun's character, and he does a heroic deed early on. He extinguishes a fire that breaks out, and he's unanimously voted as, the leader of the apartment complex, which basically means, the leader of the world at this point. And the main conflict of the film, which the plot synopsis suggested, it's fueled by whether or not the residents in this apartment complex will lend their building and resources to outsiders who are looking for shelter and food. Because some people, there was a decent number of people who survived this earthquake. Most people are dead, though. So, this is the only building left standing. So what's the moral dilemma? And it is interesting to see the portrayal of a small society reforming after a huge earthquake with, reestablishment of rules and ethics that may be different from what we have now in developed nations, right? And there's more of a traditional tribal element of power to this, as well as even more of a mob mentality. And this does create a sense of danger for our main characters, because if you anger the wrong person in this environment, it's a death sentence. It just is. So I think the movie does do a good job of showing these types of things, and the performances are good enough to back it up. That's the core of the film, and it does work well enough. But my problem is that it never really expands outside of its core concepts or even explores them in refreshing ways. It's not given enough room to breathe or introduce other ideas or genres. You basically have this tiny concept early on, and it just kind of stays there. I mean, you could read some social commentary into this too, but it's pretty basic stuff. Now, this is deliberately paced with a focus on dialogue and talks between the characters, and the film is almost entirely set in drab, repetitive environments. I mean, it's basically a normal apartment building, and everything around the building is just gray-colored disaster imagery, like fallen buildings and like earth crust upheavals and stuff like that. And it's, the lack of interesting visuals does not help to maintain interest in this film, like, at all. A few of the earlier disaster scenes are shown in flashbacks to show you, like, what happened. They're pretty good. Obviously a bit unrealistic, but whatever. The physical conflicts in the present day in the film are basically just, scuffles. You get some punches, mob attacks, stuff like, an occasional firearm, stuff like that. But one of the better scenes that I liked was in, like, a claustrophobic area. It was like a collapsed building or rubble, and a guy has to like crawl through it to try to get inside to find some resources, and there's like dead bodies inside, and it was pretty, I liked that scene. That was like a highlight scene for me, I think. But I mean, there's really not a lot to talk about this movie. I mean, Concrete Utopia is a movie that I think will be considered by many to be of good quality, and it is. But it's on the bland side of the equation, and there's nothing about it that's that memorable. It's pretty good, but I would say it's not a priority. I'm probably never going to watch it again. Needless to say, I was somewhat surprised to read that South Korea selected this film as its entry for Best International Feature Film for the Academy Awards. And I was a little bit surprised. Like, you guys don't have anything more interesting than this? This is like been there, done that type stuff, but yeah, it didn't make the final list, so I'm not very surprised. But maybe I'm in the minority here. I think this is pretty good, but not that great. Have you seen Concrete Utopia? It's currently available streaming on Viki.com. If you have seen it, let me know your thoughts. And as always, I'll see you next time.